get through the initial phases of getting started, but I'm really super excited about the show, and I'm so happy you're able to log in, and really thrilled to have Kim Lamontagne as my first guest on the show. So welcome, Kim. If you haven't already, please hit the like button and comment below on where you're calling in from, and we'd love to find out. And hopefully I just lost Rollis. Let's see.
You haven't lost me. I'm still here.
Right?
I'm still here. You haven't lost me.
Learning how to keep going, right?
We're good.
Ah, there we go. So if you see us on live, please hit the like button and comment below and let us know where you're phoning in from. But we really do have a great discussion today that we're going to be discussing leadership vitality and mental health in the workplace. So I'm super thrilled that this will be my first go live show with everybody. It's been such a pleasure thus far being on Rollis's show, but I guess before we get started, I'd like to give a huge shout out to Rollis and his team for making this happen. So thank you so much for this opportunity. That literally deserves my own round of applause. Thank you, Rollis. And hopefully when he gets the opportunity a little bit later, he can kind of shine in on the background, but he will be there as my coach getting us through, or AKA the producer of the show. And so we'll get it kicked off hopefully in a few minutes. Are we live yet?
Oh, you're absolutely. You've been live. You're ready to go.
Woo! Yay! So I can't see on my end. So, all right, this is awesome. Well, welcome everybody. So we've got a lot of great, robust discussions coming in today, and one of the questions that I've had asked my way is, what got me started in this on LinkedIn, and how did I get to the point of where I'm at now? And it's been an interesting journey since I left my position as a nursing director back in May. And I got onto LinkedIn initially to look for a job because I thought that's what LinkedIn was all about, looking for a job, putting your resumes out there. And I've started to do some networking and some research. Being the nurse that I am, we're always digging deep into a lot of things to see what's out there. And I came across a lot of amazing healthcare professionals on this website and really got to know so many people who are out there for the greater good, and not only in organizations, but in an entrepreneurial aspect. And I said, wow, there's so many healthcare workers and nurses out there that are doing incredible things. And throughout this process, I got to know Rollis as well. The two of us had met, and he had asked me to be on a show. And at first I was like, oh my gosh, what does that mean? So it was Fun and Games Friday. And I don't know if anyone has seen Fun and Games Friday, but it is a blast. It gives everyone in healthcare a chance to kind of take a step back, have fun. And when he introduced me to this, I was like, okay, so here I am. I'm researching now. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to wear, do my hair, all this stuff. And it was really just to introduce yourself, who you are, why you're here, and have fun. And from then, I was very, very blessed and very thankful that I got to join other shows with Rollis. And I started to think that, what if I had the ability to create some thoughts and ideas around having my own show, given the fact that there's so many healthcare professionals and leaders out there that have a story to tell and are really out in the workforce right now that are trying to do their best and be their best for others. And that was my whole purpose, really, of starting to get my own show going, as I'm starting to create what the entrepreneurial world looks like for me today. So I'm ecstatic and thrilled beyond belief to have Kim Lamontagne on the show. Kim has since then, in the last few months, we connected as colleagues, and now she's probably going to be a friend for life. And I'd like to introduce Kim, or actually have Kim introduce herself right now, and then we'll start getting into some great discussions.
Well, thank you, Noelle, and thank you for the introduction. And I too, similar to you, have met so many incredibly influential, impactful, and inspirational individuals on LinkedIn, and including Rollis. And I met you through his Fun and Games Friday program. So thrilled to be here. I am calling in today from Sarasota, Florida. and I am a new entrepreneur. I left my corporate role of or being in the corporate space for 25 years. I left that on April 1 of this year and started my own company. And I had been doing work around mental health in the workplace, speaking, teaching, and training as a part-time passion project. And this year, it just became very evident to me that I needed to make it my full-time project. So on April 1, I left corporate and I focused full-time on speaking, teaching, and training. And I now teach organizational leaders how to create a culture of safety in the workplace that empowers employees, leaders to come forward and speak openly about mental health and well-being and say, I'm not okay and I need help without fear of any judgment whatsoever. So it's an honor to be here today, and I'm looking forward to getting into the discussion.
Thank you. And I think that's fantastic because what I've noticed over the last couple months that I've had time as a leader to really sit back and reflect and pause, there's one word that keeps coming to my mind, and that is vitality. And for whatever reason, it literally sprung a light bulb into my head. I kept thinking about leadership vitality and what does that mean? And leadership cannot deliver the work that they do without having that strength within themselves. And I find it really fascinating that there's so much work for leaders to do for their staff and for others around them, but my focus is going to be on the leader themselves. We talk so much about how leaders need to retain nurses, how leaders need to focus on this, leaders need to be good to their employees. It's so much of what a leader has to do, but in order to do that, you have to build the strength within you and with your team in order to get there. And I'm really excited to announce before we get into the show that I had an epiphany and had some wonderful, robust discussions with yours truly, Rollis, about taking these ideas and these next steps and bringing them to fruition. And I'm really thrilled to announce that I'm going to be developing a new graduate nursing retention program that is specifically based for leaders. Sometimes leaders come into a position that they didn't ask for. They may want it, but they're not quite ready to be there. And there's so many wonderful emerging leaders that are out there that want to be in these type of positions, but we have to set them up for success. And I've been very blessed where I grew up in the organization that I did out in California to get such an immense amount of training. And even then, until you're put into a situation, you're like, oh my gosh, okay, how am I going to deal with this? Emotional intelligence comes into play with that. But you have to be strong for yourself. You have to be able to have a leadership network to get there, or a lot of this isn't going to work the way that you want it to do. And I've even said to myself for the last few years, I felt like I was losing the leader within me, and I didn't quite know what that meant until now. And we need to do more for leaders so leaders can do for their staff, for their patients. And so I'm really excited about this program that's coming out. The goal is to get leaders in a place where they could be able to have that strength to execute on the deliverables that they're looking for with hardwire and consistency, and use their numbers and metrics as sort of a soundboard for where they're going to go for the next few years. And my God, the best place to start that with is learning how to lead your new graduate nurses. So I'm super excited about that. So stay tuned for more details for that. And really that leads into leadership vitality in itself. So, I'd like to ask the audience to work the way that you want it. Sorry, I hear a little bit of an echo there. And so really, I'd like to reach out to the audience too, as I'll start, you'll see me look down and it's just trying to get the comments up so I can see where everyone is logging in from. But what does vitality and leadership look like to you? Give me some strengths that you feel that leaders need and may need to get in order to get to where they need to go. Now, I'm gonna look a little bit towards Kim in this direction too, because as we notice, if we look amid these times, leaders have been faced with unprecedented amount of responsibility and taking on some things that they may never had to look at before. Most of us, my background's been in critical care, we've dealt with emergencies, we've dealt with traumas, we've dealt with situations coming in. I was not there for the Boston Marathon bombing, but I still hear how the organizations within Boston talk about how that impacted them and what they were prepared for. Now, you look at trauma like that, you look at trauma coming into a pandemic, there's a time where leaders have to sit back and reflect and take time for themselves. And, my partnership and my conversations with Kim were really based off of what happened to me when I left my position, because, leaders don't have it in them, for lack of a better word, to take their mask off, because we have to be that armor for everyone. And we have to be able to put forth and fight and keep going. And subtle signs may come up. For me, it was nightmares. I would have nightmares a lot for the last several months. I couldn't sleep. I was kind of dazed out at work, and I never really understood what that meant. I'm like, oh, it's stress. And you see your colleagues and you're like, hey, how's it going? I'm good. How are you? I'm great. And we'd all walk away and we're like, oh my God, this is not okay. And I chuckle about it now, but these are the subtle hints that we need to take for ourselves to recognize that, very similar to the oxygen on the airplane, if you don't take care of yourself, you will fall apart. Leaders are not meant to be the armor all the time. You are human beings and you need to function for yourself. And I'd love for Kim to chime in a little bit more about that, and really what that looks like, what a leader can do, and how do they recognize these subtle hints before really having a breakdown.
And that's such a great topic, Noelle, and I appreciate you really starting that conversation. So many things to address here. You hit the nail on the head that leaders are struggling. Some leaders are struggling. And the anatomy of a leader is typically from the outside to have that strong coat of armor, that nothing can phase that person, that they are a beacon of hope and strength and someone that people follow. And when they are struggling with their own internal mental health and or substance use problems, many times they feel like they can't take off that armor and tell their employees that, I'm having a hard time too. So they continue to power through it. And my own experience was, again, I was in the workplace, high performing, developing the relationships, making the numbers, training, teaching. But at the end of the day, I was struggling with alcohol use disorder. I was struggling with the fact that I personally needed to drink every single night, 5, 6, 7 glasses of wine. I never drank while I drove. I never drank on the job, but every single day I had to drink. And then that led me into feeling ashamed, unworthy, very much less than. It propelled me into depression, suicidal thoughts, and I couldn't get myself out of that hole. And I was too afraid to say a word to anyone. Not a single person in my family, my friends, my coworkers knew I was struggling. The only person that everyone in my life knew was the high-performing Kim Lamontagne. And it wasn't until 2 particular instances where I stood up in front of my own coworkers at a business development sales summit and shared my own story with them. My vice president asked me to bring my story forward. And after I shared the side of me that no one in that room had ever seen before, 8 of my own coworkers admitted that they were also struggling and that they got permission to take off their mask after hearing my own personal story. And another time, I was speaking at a conference in Houston with over 100 senior leaders from HR in healthcare systems all across the area that I was speaking in. And 13 senior vice presidents, VPs, directors, managers came up to me after I shared my own personal story and said, I saw so many pieces of my own story in what you just shared. But wow, I'm too afraid to talk about it because I'm a leader, and I'm afraid of losing my professional reputation, my
Mhm.
integrity. I'm afraid of losing my seat at the table. I'm afraid of being seen weak and incapable. And therefore, I don't say a word. But what happens when we don't feel safe enough to say a word to someone in the workplace?
Mhm.
What happens is that we internalize, and it starts to affect our mental health, our physical health, the way we're showing up in the workplace. Presenteeism could start to creep in. And for those in the audience who are not familiar with presenteeism, that is basically individuals who are showing up on the job, but due to outside circumstances, they are not fully functioning. They are the working wounded. It is the cousin to absenteeism. Absenteeism is very clear. An employee is not in that day, no expectation of productivity from that person. Presenteeism is really hard to spot because that's a person who is trying to function at their top
Mhm.
level, but they're not able to. So one of the things that I teach a lot of is understanding your own personal signs. What are the signs that you are going into a depressive episode? Do you stop returning phone calls? Do you stop returning texts? Some of my signs in the workplace I thought were very noticeable, but no one figured it out. I was canceling and rescheduling meetings. That was a
Mhm.
sign. I stopped coming up with my out of the box trailblazing ideas. That was a sign. I was
Mhm.
still meeting my numbers, but I backed down a little bit. I stopped collaborating at a specific level. That was a sign. But above and beyond that, I was a remote employee. No one saw the
Right.
massive weight loss that I had. I got so skinny to the point where my doctor said, Kim, if you lose another ounce, you're going in the hospital. You have to eat.
Wow.
So I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. I was only eating sugar and coffee. I survived on ice cream for an entire year because after I gave up alcohol in
Yeah,
2009,
you
11
needed
years,
something.
I needed the sugar. I was so sick, but I was so afraid to talk about it. And it wasn't until 2016 that I found the courage to start sharing my story. That's 7 years after I got sober. And as soon as I started stepping on stages, speaking to leaders, sharing my story, and I saw the incredible amount of people who reach out to me and say, my God, I am just like you. It gives me goosebumps because that's when I knew I need to make this my primary focus. And I need to give leaders these tools to help create a mentally healthy workplace culture that allows employees and leaders to feel safe, seen, heard, and understood in the workplace. It's
You
good for
brought up
humanity, great for retention.
And you brought up such a great point that when you tell your story, the amount of people that actually come up to recognize that they feel the same way. And I often think, what is it going to take for organizations, for companies to not have it become that way? And how do we create that environment where as a leader, you can go to your leader, you can go to your, to the president, the CEO, or someone of the company and say, hey, I need a second here. I'm not okay. So these are the type of environments that we really need to start having these open dialogues and letting leaders know that this is okay to have these discussions. You should not feel job jeopardy. You should not feel that you're going to lose reputation or your ability to continue to proceed in what you're doing. And I'd like to just recognize as I glance over at the comments. Alicia chimed in and had some great feedback for you. She said, wow, Kim, um, and what we don't know is the energy that is felt internally and how that impacts people around us. And absolutely. And also the triggers. Triggers are a huge thing. So thank you for your comments, Alicia. And it looks like Patty chimed in too. Hi, Patty. Um, but you bring up such great points with that. And, you know, leaders have to be able to find a way with each other that if I recognize that something is wrong, and I kind of connect this to when we look at, when I look at nursing, right? Our one of our main goals is patient satisfaction. And how do we purposefully round with patients at the bedside to make sure that they are satisfied and they are getting the best care, you know, taken that they need. And I look at that also with staff and with leaders, right? If you see me walking down the hallway and I'm like, I'm okay, and you know that I'm not, just say, hey, let's go for a walk. Let's get outside for 2 minutes. That interruption may be exactly what a leader needs to reset, to focus for the next 4 to 5 hours left in their day. I'm not saying it's going to correct their self and their well-being for a term, but it's these little points that we have to focus on and just say, no, you're not okay. Come on, let's go to Starbucks. Let's get a coffee. Let's go here. And sometimes you may not need to say anything, but it's those subtle moments that we have to recognize. And especially during these times now, everybody in some way is stressed out, is suffering, is experiencing some sort of PTSD. And we've got to recognize that. And I think we as a healthcare organization are starting to get to that point where we're recognizing it with self, but how do we take care of self? And that's where you have to come together. And I'll be the first to say my biggest failure with myself was isolating myself. I isolated myself from my family. All the times that I was at work, I would come in and out of work because I was staying close to the hospital 3, 4, 5 times a day. I would have meetings somewhere else, not in my office. And I just thought it was because I needed a break. But the amount of times you think you need a break, even as a nurse, leaving yourself alone to your own thoughts is like the worst thing you could do for yourself. And wine was another thing too. We all love our wine. I'm a wine connoisseur. I love great wine, but it put me in a position where it was good to feel numb. And you don't want to have that. I was not a heavy drinker, but I realized when you add stress and disruption in personal self with other factors that make you feel numb, you can't focus on what you need to do. And I think my biggest message to leaders out there, and which is why I'm really passionate about getting into a leadership program to focus on how we can drive vitality back into the workforce with leaders again, is to get a hold of yourself, right? Like, I don't know how other way to put it, but you have to find a way to get a hold of yourself, because there's so many valuable leaders. And I look at all of these emerging leaders that are out there right now who are so brilliant to the jobs that they were given and the work that they can do, but we've got to get them to a point where they know that they can do that. Because some leaders have come into the pandemic with such a great background, but you wonder of, oh my gosh, I actually can't be there to train you because this is what's happening. And that's part of the pause.
And I think it's about, it's about recognizing in yourself the signs that you're displaying. You were just talking about the signs that you displayed. You isolated. You did the same thing as me. You didn't do your meetings in your office. You did them somewhere else. Were you hiding from people? So again, it's about identifying what are the things that you do personally. I know for me, and I'm very healthy. I'm about 99.9% healthy, maybe a 1% of dark thoughts. But when the dark thoughts come in, I have these barriers that come up that allow me to say, oh, there's a thought that doesn't belong there. I recognize it. And then I work through it. Where before I had no clue that I had the opportunity to challenge my own thoughts. But I know that if I'm on social media too much, if I'm avoiding phone calls and texts, if I'm not eating, I tell my family, if you see any of those things happening, check in on me and say, hey, Kim, how are you doing? And then when I say I'm fine, 2 of the most dangerous words on the planet, by the way, are I'm fine. That was my go-to response all the time. I'm fine. But behind that I'm fine was someone who was broken, falling to pieces. I was shattered. I was dark. I was on the brink of taking my own life in 2013. I could rationalize why everyone in my life would be better off without me. I mean, I was in a horrible place, but still outwardly functioning. But now my family knows if they start to see any of those signs, they will say, how are you, Kim? And I'll say, I'm fine. And then I instructed them to follow that up with are you really fine? Tell me how you're, because like you said, it's so easy to just say, hey, how are you doing? I'm fine. How are you? Right. And then you just being mindful of saying, Glad you're doing great. How are you really doing? Or something that Rawlis has adopted that I shared with him, put your emotions on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being terrible, 10 being great.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you on that emotional scale? And use this with friends and family and coworkers as well. And when someone responds, I'm at a 6.
That's
Ask
such
that
a
person.
great point.
Yep. Ask that person, what's preventing you from becoming a 7? Not what's preventing you from becoming a 10, because little steps make a difference, but what would help you get from a 6 to a 7? And then focus on that little shift. But to go back to the leaders feeling safe, it's about creating that culture. It's a culture shift in the workplace. It has to happen at the top. A culture and a commitment to ending stigma and discrimination in the workplace. Adopting new language. Instead of using the language of someone is an alcoholic or a junkie or an addict or they've gone off the wagon, let's rid ourselves of those negative words and adopt a new type of language, which is person-centered. So that person is no longer an alcoholic. That's a person living with alcohol use disorder. That's my coworker struggling with mental illness. He's not crazy. He's a person who is struggling. Because when we adopt this language in the workplace and we use this language in the workplace, people feel more included. Mm-hmm. They don't feel like gathered around a water cooler discussion where they're talking about their coworker, John Doe, who just checked himself into the behavioral health unit. We don't speak negatively about him being crazy, psycho. We say, that's my coworker, John Doe, and I'm so proud of him. He's a person who is struggling, and he took the necessary steps to check himself in to a place where he can recover. It totally changes the discussion about, it gets rid of a lot of the judgment in the workplace.
Absolutely.
And that's really why that's why people are afraid to talk. They're afraid of being judged.
And you bring up such a great point, because we use words like that so interchangeably. I'm like, what are you, crazy today? You know? And there's one word, and I'm going to go ahead and look at the comments and break this up a little bit with some fun too, and some thoughts for the group. Is you mentioned a word, fine, and I love that word. It makes me laugh, but not laugh in like a funny way, because when people say they're fine, I go back to, I don't know if anyone's seen that movie, The Italian Job. And the reason I say that is because that word fine was referenced as freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. And since that, now I am not one to remember. I am not one to remember movies at all. I could watch a movie halfway through it. I'd be like, oh, wait, I've seen this before. But for whatever reason, that word stuck out to me in that movie. And it's so true. And if you think about it, if someone's like, I'm fine, like that, you think about the words freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. And it just makes sense, because like, when do people often use the words I'm fine? It's not when you're actually ever fine. So, you know, and speaking of movies, I'm going to break this up a little bit, because the thought has come to my mind. I know often on Rawliss's shows, we do a lot of fun games of, you know, would you rather, and you know, trying to do some questions about like getting a book and things like that. But I want to ask the audience, since the pandemic, and really it started when I broke my leg last year, I was never a TV person at all. I could not sit down in front of the TV. I don't watch the news at all. I literally live in a bubble, but Netflix has been like my go-to. And it's so funny that I can't get enough of it now. And my husband even laughs, because we're always on television. Or like watching television, I should say. So Kim, do you watch Netflix? Like, what are some of your favorite shows? My newest one that I'm watching is Designated Survivor. Has anybody seen that? I'd love to hear your comments to see what you guys are into right now on Netflix. What about you, Kim?
So honestly, I barely watch any TV at all. I have 3 TVs in my little house here.
Get out of here.
I can't remember the last time that they were on. And I know. I'm just so busy doing my work and just enjoying life, you know, and experiences. But I don't have Netflix, but I have Hulu. And my daughter laughs at me because I keep watching the same show the entire series over and over again. And that's Private Practice, which was a spin-off of Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah.
And it's funny because
that was a good show, though.
I'll put it on my phone when I go to. It was a great show, but I don't know that I've ever seen every single episode all the way through, because when I watch it on Hulu, I end up falling asleep and I wake up the next morning and I might have started on episode 2 and now I'm on episode 15. So I don't know that I've ever seen every single episode, awesome. But that's my fave.
But that's the good thing about Netflix is I could not watch regular TV anymore. You have to commercials. I can't do it. And so it looks like Alicia's coming in. The Queen's Gambit. I've not heard that one. I'll have to take a look at that. Oh, she also mentioned in the discussion that what we were talking about earlier are those triggers. Those words are called microaggressions. I've not heard that before either. Oh, and micro insults. Interesting. Thank you for that.
Yeah, it totally makes a difference. I mean, just to think about, for so many years, I thought I was an alcoholic, and that was such a dirty word to me.
Yeah.
Such a dirty word. There's so many negative connotations that come with that word. And ever since I've found my sobriety and really learned throughout my journey, if someone wants to label me as an alcoholic, I would say, well, yes, but let me offer you a different way of looking at it. Look at me as a person who's living with this disorder that's manageable. Mm-hmm. Instead of giving me a label, because if I had high cholesterol, you wouldn't call me a high cholesterolaholic, or, it wouldn't matter that I had high cholesterol. So why does it matter that you're associating me as an alcoholic rather than I'm just a person who lives very successfully without any alcohol in my life? And I'm good with that. I was on a podcast with someone a couple of weeks ago, and her brother died by suicide several years ago, and she's dedicated this podcast to him. When she introduced the show, she was talking about her brother who committed suicide. And I thought, okay, do I want to challenge the host? And I didn't want to challenge her, but I said, you know what, Kristen? I invite you to think about this new language. Instead of your brother committing suicide, I invite you to begin saying that he died by suicide, because suicide was the final symptom of his mental illness, of his major depression. He died by suicide. He did not commit anything. When you commit something, there's something negative. When you die by something, it's acceptable. He died by suicide, and she has adopted that language ever since that last discussion, but she wasn't aware of it.
Yeah.
And it's about
people. What a great point, Kim. And it's really, and it's interesting because I've always said it's how you say what you say, but this brings it to a whole new level. And you're absolutely correct. You do end up becoming into a mindset that you've never thought you'd reach before. And, these were the times that, and I'm happy to share this and be transparent too, in that the last, several months, really it started when I broke my leg. I understood, I actually was able to dig deep within myself and look out and understand why certain things happened. There was so much question around and uncertainty of why the physician in New York committed suicide, as people would say, how that happened. And until you really take that pause and that step back, and I'm going to use this analogy in so many ways. I'm using it in my new program that I'll be starting with leaders. I use it with so many people. You have to pause and think about what you see, what you hear, and what is going to come out of your mouth next that's going to make a difference. Because my issues with me ended up becoming everybody else's problem, which it shouldn't have. And I didn't recognize that my own internal issues that created a lot around would impact other people, but I also didn't know how to deal with that too. And at that point, when you're in your own hole, I look around, I'm like, oh, now I know why that person jumped off the bridge. Or, hey, when that person threw their kids in a car and went into the ocean, I get that. Would I ever do that? No, thank God I was never in that state of mind. But we can't start judging people. And it goes into leadership too. And I would love to hear others' experience about what they or interact with as well. And as I glance over, I'm starting to see some of the comments come through. And thank you, Casey, and even Patty, who just said, I really hate labels. And we're always labeling. We're guilty. I'm guilty of that. I think we're all guilty of that. But we have to get to a point we teach our kids how to be kind, how to talk. We create the environment that we're in. And if we are labeling, then we need to take a step back, because labeling is judgment. And these chips that you are giving out to others are slowly going to start to chip away at yourself too. And I think starting with the leadership teams is the perfect place to start. Everyone always says from the top down, and you always want to get to the front lines, and you do, but you can't run a group at the front lines and execute on awesomeness, for lack of a better way of saying it, if you were not put together up here. Leaders up here have to accept that everyone is in a place that they've not been before. Let's talk about it. Let's discuss it. Let's bring the leaders back to where they need to be so they can then execute right back to the front lines. Because it's funny, because people don't know me, or that I've been told over the last few months, as like having like issues or being weak, because I'm always like, wherever you see me, this is me. This is who I am. I'm smiling, I'm laughing, I'm going. And every little thing that kept happening, everyone's like, well, I mean, if it's going to happen to anyone, it should happen to you, because nobody hops back up better than you do. And you chuckle at that. And for some reasons or ways that may be true, but every leader saying that to every leader. At first I thought it was me, but it's not just me. We all say that to each other. We're human, and we have to bring back the human factors, I think, into that. Alicia mentioned meditation was a huge help for her. And I think that's great. I think everybody needs to try to find their spot, their sweet spot of what's going to make them feel better. Kim, what are your thoughts on that, as far as if they don't know, or they don't have an idea of what they can do for themselves, how can one find a method or find that out?
I think everyone really gravitates towards something different, but for me, I teach individuals to find some non-negotiables that are in your life, something that really lights you up, something that if someone tried to take it away from you, you'd say, no, that's non-negotiable. You can't take that.
I love that.
And really commit to those things, write them down. For me, I've said it before on a few different shows. I live 12 minutes from Siesta Key Beach. I'm down at that beach every single night whenever my schedule allows. That is my self-care time, to go down there, put on my headphones, watch a beautiful sunset. I get creative down there. I have like downloads that come down on that beach where I'm like, oh, I have a great idea. And I come back and I write. And that's one of my non-negotiables. So it's really finding things that light you up, that allow you to disengage. And you are absolutely right that we have to just stop. And I'm a subject matter expert for a Facebook group of 640,000 nurses called Show Me Your Step. And I do Facebook Lives for them every Sunday. And every single week, one of the biggest problems in that group is burnout. The comments, the messages, the posts, these nurses are burnt out. They are fried. They don't know what to do. And I teach them about, going into your own personal toolkit, but making sure that that toolkit is not empty. What do you put in that toolkit? The first thing you need to put in there is a stop sign. So like when you're having that sense of overwhelm and you're feeling those negative thoughts, like me, I have those barriers that go up in my mind, and I say, okay, there's a big red light right there. I need to stop and investigate this. And then I would go to, okay, what's my non-negotiable? What are the tools that I need to do to get myself out of this thought? One of the things that I do is I question every single thought if it's stressful, because 99.9% of the time it's something that I've made up. And I'll give you an example. If I am in the middle of a project, I'm doing great on work, everything's going great in my life, and then I make a mistake on a project. First thing, natural thing for us to think is, oh my gosh, I'm so stupid. Why did I do that? If my mind latches onto I'm so stupid, I'm going to feel less than, unworthy, stupid. I'm going to feel all these negative emotions that'll affect my mind and also physically. But if I take a second to stop and say, is that really true that I'm stupid? This is like that. I went through the work of Katie. So she has this process where you question your stressful thought.
Mm-hmm.
The second question is that thought really true? So you have two options to question that thought. If you still believe that that thought is true, that I'm stupid, then you tell yourself, how does it make you feel? How do you react?
Right.
And then the fourth question, or fourth part of the process is, who would you be without that thought? Well, if I didn't think I was stupid, I'd feel great. I would feel all these wonderful things. So it just allows me to go back and say, wait a minute, I'm not stupid. I made a silly mistake, but it does not mean that I am overall stupid. But the mind is a real powerful thing. And, I wanted to talk specifically about, the nurses that I speak with on a regular basis, and some statistics that I wanted to share with this group, because I know a lot of folks watching today could be from healthcare. So I was actually part of a national nurse well-being survey in April of this year that was done by Hullabaloo and Feed Trail, two separate organizations. One's a research firm and one is a nursing company. And I wrote part of the mental health questions on this survey. We had over 1,300 nurses and clinicians respond to this survey.
That's incredible.
Yep, a lot of it was done we deployed it through the Show Me Your Stethoscope platform, and I also put it out on LinkedIn and Facebook. We had 78% of the respondents were nurses. The rest were just other clinical professionals, and they represented acute care and long-term care facilities. But what I really wanted to share, some of the results that came back, is that 50% of the respondents on this survey reported that they become worried at the thought of going to work.
Wow.
This was April of this year, not that long ago. They're worried. What's even more disturbing is that their worry is manifesting as being distracted. 52% of nurses and clinicians say they're distracted because of their worry. 56 say that they're not able to concentrate because they're worried. 45% say that they're having intrusive thoughts because of their worry. And then the respondents said that 66% of them are experiencing anxiety, 62% are experiencing emotional stress, 54% are experiencing a lack of sleep.
Wow.
To further compound this, we sliced and diced the data a little bit deeper, and we looked into stigma in the workplace, and 56% feel that there's stigma in the workplace around mental health and well-being, and half of the respondents feel either unsafe or neutral asking for help in the workplace around mental health. The very last statistic here is the kicker. 78% of those who felt unsafe asking for help around mental illness in the workplace, 78% said they're likely to leave their current position or their specialty altogether.
Wow.
That's there is huge. It's an enormous reason why we need.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you've got half of your workforce who's afraid to ask for help, and a high percentage who are like, I don't feel comfortable, I don't feel safe, heard, so I'm just going to leave this employer and go somewhere else. We have a big problem. We need to fill that gap.
Exactly. And again, it just, when you look at the cycle of events here, it does go back to leadership. And if you don't have a leadership team that's strong enough, but wants to be strong enough, these situations are going to happen. And that's where it goes back to retention. You're not going to be able to retain these nurses that may want to stay, but because they're having these feelings, they don't. And unfortunately, during these times, the grass is not greener on the other side. The only thing that may make a situation better is that you may come in contact with a different leader who's leading a different way. That could be better, that could be worse. And I think there's so much work to be done with mental health, with leadership teams together to fix themselves in order for them to be able to fix others. And, I feel like I'm a living example of that. I realized in the end, I was not the leader that I was or that I could be. And I couldn't do anything about it. My leadership should have been a direct reflection of how my team leads. And I didn't even know how I was leading myself at that point. And it's okay. It is okay. It's important that leaders get to that point before that bucket tips over, right? There's a balance in either direction. You want to keep it within the bucket. I don't know where this bucket analogy is coming from right now, but I'm going to roll with it. You've got to keep it within the bucket. You're going to tip one way or another, but if we focus on the strength and vitality within the leadership team, find what brings energy and strength to them, to recognize any triggers that are happening with them, create that environment of space to give back to yourself, you'll give back to your team, and you've got to be humble. There's so much strength and humility. I cannot emphasize that onto anybody anymore. There is so much strength and humility to say to your team, I can't do this right now. Give me a second. I'm kind of like at a breaking point myself. Let me go back to my office. Let me regroup my thoughts and I will come back. That is okay. If we have that same expectation of staff, sometimes they need to step out of a room, even with a patient. You have your team to support you. Leaders need to have that teamwork as well, because you have got to be able to take that step back and say, pause, I'm having a moment here.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree, because leaders lead by example. And if I had a leader who all of a sudden took a pause and was honest that he or she needs to take a moment, I would be like, oh my gosh, wow. Like, you're showing me another side of you. Like, well, maybe I can then show you when I'm having a difficult time. And being humble, so true. I mean, my story is not unique. Your story is not unique. But what is unique is that we are willing to step forward and share our stories for the good of others. And I will tell you that when I first started putting my story out on social media, it was nerve-wracking to put it out on Facebook. It was 100 times more nerve-wracking to put it out on LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
Because these are my peers. These are my colleagues. These are clients. These are potential clients that I'm speaking to. But what I've found, I've had so many people cheering me on and reaching out to me randomly saying, Kim, I am applauding you.
That's amazing. And it's incredible.
And it's like it just went out the window once I started to see the amount of people that needed me to step forward and be honest. And then to step away from corporate, go into a pandemic and develop an entire corporate training in the middle of a pandemic, and now teaching it to leaders on how to do what we're talking about today, how to build that culture of safety top level down. Everything happens just the way it's supposed to. And it's just critical that this is at the forefront of all of our discussions right now, because we are not alone. We are not alone. We all matter. And we all need to speak openly about our experiences and share them, and share how you got through it with others, to reach back and give them a roadmap of, wow, I just went through this. This is what I did, and not be afraid.
This is the time, and you're so spot on. And a lot of comments are coming in just blown away by the statistics. Dominic said that these statistics are insane. Rallis commented shortly, thereafter, agreeing. And it's very true. And if you really focus on even the new grad retention rate, in most organizations, it's about 50% of new grads are leaving their current job within the first 2 to 3 years. Overall, it's about 19% last year. These statistics are high. And we've got to come together as organizations to be able to take care of the inevitable and what's coming ahead. As I'm talking, I think about I don't know if anyone's into cars or race cars, but I'm a huge car fan. I love, my father's a mechanic. I've changed my own brakes, my own tires, and there's a reason I'm getting to a point of where I'm at. I love cars, stick shift, the whole 9 yards. I think about Formula One racing, right? If you look at Formula One racing and you look at the cockpit and the way that these men function in, or women in the cockpit, they're unison, they're together. You change tires, you move, no one's talking, everyone's moving. They're there with the same mindset. If something happens, everybody stops, right? Everybody stops to figure it out. It's the same concept with like air traffic control. That's another direction that I'm going in. In order to do your job and do it successfully, everybody has to be there together as a team. You are dealing with high priority, competing priorities together. But if something goes wrong, whatever that may be, and I reflect this back into leaders, you have to look at those situations and take that pause and listen to the leaders around you to come together. You've got to take a second, because anything you execute after may come off of being from an emotional standpoint and reactive, and that's not where leaders want to be. You know, and I think these are such great discussions. There's so much work that I'm excited that you and I are both looking at ahead and working on when it comes to building strength and vitality within leadership teams and letting them recognize who they are so they have the ability to even care for their staff, but also take care of themselves as well. The mental health piece is so aligned in that, and you cannot take care of others without taking care of yourself.
That's right. And a healthier employee is a more engaged employee, and a more engaged employee is providing better patient care, customer service. If you're in the healthcare space, you're a healthcare leaders, your HCAP scores, those are what keep you awake at night. And is the mental health and well-being of your workforce a contributing factor to those HCAP scores? Well, looking
Absolutely.
at the that I just went through, absolutely. So, and again, when I contribute to that nursing Facebook group, I have new grad nurses were just in that Facebook group last week in a conversation, 3 months into their new role because of COVID and all the stress, they're ready to walk away. These nurses are putting their mental health and well-being on a scale of 1 to 10. They're putting it at a 0, a negative, or a 1 or a 2. You know, there's very few in that group who are putting themselves on a 6 to a 10. The majority of them are just barely holding it together. And there's some leadership discussions in there as well. And, but mental health and well-being, you know, it's huge. And one of the other things that I talk about as well is, you say, take a pause. I have these little chips here. So it says 10 minutes on it. This is a chip. So when you have 24 hours of sobriety, they give you a 24-hour chip. When you have 1 month, they give you a 1-month chip, or a year, 2 years, 10 years. Mm-hmm. This one's a 10-minute chip, and on the back it just says serenity to accept, the courage to change, and the wisdom to know. And what I teach with this chip is that sometimes getting through an entire 24 hours is overwhelming. Mm-hmm. I mean, 2013 to 2015, it was hard for me to get through a minute, but I did it. But sometimes people get overwhelmed because they feel like they have to get through the day, through the week, through the month. Sometimes if you just pause and say, I can get through the next 10 minutes, pull out this little chip. I hand these out. Well, when I used to speak in person, I would hear they hand these out, but pull it out and just remember, I can get through the next 10 minutes. And if I can get through the next 10 minutes, then I can take another 10 minutes and keep stringing those 10 minutes along until you've got a 24-hour time frame.
That's awesome.
It's recognizing and it's educating from the top to empower the employees from the bottom and the top to be able to have those open conversations, and for a leader to really say, you know what, I see you, I support you. I now understand, because now we're educated about the statistics and the impact, signs, and how I can help you in the right words. I get it now. So let's all have a healthy discussion. That's what my passion is, to make every workplace a mentally healthy workplace culture.
I can't believe we've almost come up to the hour already. I feel like we could go on. We have 5 more minutes left, and just to get a few of the last comments in, which I love. Raul said he loves that 10-minute idea. Thank you, Dominic. We will continue to preach. And as we're saying this, and I'm thinking, and I just, as the thought came in, I love how in sync Raul and I are. It's like great minds are just right there. He's saying that we both have created such a great work and a course for leaders. I was thinking the same thing, because with leadership, with strength comes mental health. With mental health and strength together comes a great team, which then transcends onto your nursing staff, which goes to your patient care. It's like, wow, a lot of greatness together. And
it's a waterfall. It's the ripple effect.
But I mean, you talk the circle of life. Good God, it's all right there. And I'm excited for the work that you're doing and that you continue to do, Kim. I love it. And I love how we've come together and really had this opportunity to talk with healthcare individuals and leaders about the importance of taking care of self in order to take care of others. And it's exciting. It's a very terrifying time, but during this time, there's so much greatness that can come out of what it is that we're doing. And I really look forward to continue to sharing with everybody the programs that I'll be developing. And my God, we might have something together after this too. Thank you for the thoughts, everyone.
And congratulations on launching this show, Noelle. I want to recognize the work you're doing.
Thank you. It's
developing a curriculum, and anyone who's on this show and meeting Noelle for the first time, but you're on this show because I posted on LinkedIn, connect with Noelle and vice versa. I'd love to connect with her. Continue the discussions. We're both passionate women who, we've got full plates, but it's not intimidating because we know it's the work that needs to get done.
To be done. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Kim. I appreciate you. I'm so happy that you were my first guest on the show. And Raul, thank you so much for this opportunity. Hopefully it went well being my first show. My God, I don't know how you do this all the time. It is a little bit more terrifying and stressful than you think, because you're like, oh gosh, next step, what are we going to talk about? How do you break it up? All that great stuff. But I think we did it. We did it.
You guys did awesome.
There he is. Where's my man behind the scenes? Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
I'll just say hi like
there
that.
There he is. Hi, Raul. Well, thank you, everybody. Have an awesome rest of your day. And I look forward to seeing you next week on Live with Noelle, Wednesdays at noon East Coast time. Stay tuned.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Okay, you guys want to do some poses for the editors?
Absolutely.
Maybe give us a happy and then some crazy poses. Awesome. Okay, once I see the last bit go through, then I'll stop the stream. I'm still streaming at this point.
This is when we should have music and go through like the end of stream like dance.
Ah, that's true. That's true.
Leave it up to me to figure out some quirky things to do while we're still streaming.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, so I just go on the screen. Okay, so it's still